Welcome to this episode of our program Daily Debate. As usual, we will be discussing an important topic. Tonight we'll be focusing on the tourism sector in Egypt, or rather the tourism industry. Definitely Egypt deserves to be on the world map, and it deserves much bigger way for being a tourism destination, a top tourism destination. During the past period, global disruptions have reflected definitely on the tourism, not only on Egypt, but rather globally, and affected the tourism sector in particular in Egypt. Today, Egypt is turning a page to its tourism industry and is starting with another phase, another strategies in order to put Egypt back on track, on the right map for it to be on the top global tourism destination. Egypt ranked first Africa, fifth in the Middle East and North Africa, and 51st globally in the World Economic Forum's recently released the 2021 TTDI, released in late 2022, and in April the UK Daily Mail news website selected Egypt as one of the best tourist destinations for the spring-summer of 2022, coming in the second place on the list of the top holidays destination. The Prime Minister is or has said that we seek to reach 30 million tourists, and the Minister of Tourism, Ahmed Isa, has indicated that the government is currently giving a lot of incentives to the private sector to double the tourist traffic coming in Egypt. In 2022, there was the figures were around 13 to 14 million tourists in Egypt, and we are seeking much more in this year and years to come. This what we will be speaking tonight with our distinguished guest, Dr. Ibrahim Hegazy, Professor of Marketing. And thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you, Mona, for inviting me, and wish you a blessed Ramadan.
Thank you. A very blessed Ramadan to you and all your beloved. Sir, before we delve into our discussion, let me first, just a few minutes ago, and the Central Bank of Egypt had made some of the announcement. The Central Bank of Egypt said it raised interest rates as the country continued to battle surging inflation and a depreciation currency. In an online statement, the Bank Monetary Policy Committee said the most basic lending rate, the overnight deposit rate, has increased from 16.25% to 18.25%, meaning 2%. The hike aims to ease spiraling inflation, with the annual figure reaching 32.9% in February from 26.5% in January. Earlier, President Sisi announced that the government employees would receive pay increase of 1,000 Egyptian pounds a month, about $34, and definitely has made some of the measures and decisions in order to alleviate the burden that has been put on the shoulders of people because of the global situation during the past period. This is part of the issue, and definitely will be discussing that with Dr. Ibrahim Hegazy. So just let me understand, what does this mean?
Well, first of all, it was expected that such a hike in the corridor rate of 2 points, simply as the message was said online, that is supposed to curb inflation. As you notice, and on the retail level, the prices have been escalating dramatically. That's not just because of Egypt's economic condition, but the global condition of the supply side, and definitely goes without saying also the Ukrainian-Russian war. That's across the board globally. And that's why most of the federal bank, central banks, whether in the US or in Europe, are also increasing their base interest rate. So the main purpose here is to curb inflation. And I think from what you mentioned earlier also, the inflation rate as monitored by CAPMAS started to decrease a little bit. Well, it's not yet noticed at the retail level, but still, it's the only way to try to curb the increase in inflation in prices, because this was really observed by many households in Egypt, regardless of the social class or the economic level. So this is something expected. The question is, what's the aftermath? You
Exactly.
know, that's
and
the question.
and that is my question. How would that reflect first on the banks and the banking deposits of people? How would that reflect on the people being able to have available currency, I mean here foreign currency? How would that reflect on the Ministry of Finance measures that were made in order to be able to...
Well, if we say this is to curb inflation, that's basically because when you raise that interest rate, you are also going to increase the certificate of deposit rates. That means that you're going to pull from the market more of the cash that is circulating in the economy. The reason for that is to try to reduce the demand for products, which is supposed also to reduce the prices. So one message that's going to happen, I think, in the early week, on the early days of next week, is you expect some certificate of deposit that will go back to the normal of 22 and 23%. So that's one side. The other side, this could be attractive also to worker remittances coming from outside Egypt, that they may want to benefit out of this high level of interest rates for their savings and their deposits. So that's expected, but we're not sure whether this will happen or not, because there are other factors that will attract more hard currency coming to the country. So these are two. But the negative side of it is that you might expect some recessionary, show-ups that could be coming now, because when you have this, the lending power, that will be very high, extremely high for starting businesses. You know, if you talk about the corridor or the level now, 18%, then if you add up the markup for banks as financial intermediaries, then you expect to be in the 30s interest rate if you're going to borrow funds to start business or to for funding the working capital of businesses. That's usually is the problem, that when you are raising interest rates to curb a major problem, the outcome are some positive, but also some negatives. What will happen exactly, it has to be seen. But that's the thermometer.
So we're speaking here about inflation vis-a-vis recession.
Yes, and that's the dilemma here. Sometimes you call it stagflation.
Exactly, that is the terminology.
At the same time, yeah. So the stagflation means you have stagnation, which usually there is no inflation, but at the same time you also have inflation. And these are two things that we are currently hoping that this will not stay for long.
Indeed, indeed. I guess what we are going to speak about tonight also has to do with foreign currency and how.
Egypt, yeah.
Yes, we'll be speaking about that. Definitely, what would be the repercussions exactly remains to be seen. But before we delve into our discussion to our main topic, let's have this very quick report, and we'll come back for more discussion.
Egypt has eased tourist visa requirements as part of efforts to boost tourism in the country. In a press conference, Minister of Tourism and Antiquities Ahmed Isa announced that tourists from China can obtain an entering visa upon arrival to Egypt, while Indian tourists who hold a Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC resident visa, can obtain an entering visa upon arrival to Egypt. He said these facilities go hand in hand with the facilities already offered to holders of a valid and used entry visa from Schengen countries, the United Kingdom, the United States of America, Japan, Australia, Canada, and New Zealand. Turkish tourists can obtain Egypt entry visa upon arrival without age restriction. while Algerian and Moroccan tourists can obtain the same visa on the condition that they are part of a tourist group. Tourists from Iran will be allowed to obtain a visa upon arrival when heading only to South Sinai through a certified tourist agency. Meanwhile, those coming from Iraq can now obtain a visa upon arrival to Egypt on the condition that they hold a valid and used visa to Schengen countries, the United Kingdom, the United States of America, Japan, Australia, Canada, or New Zealand. Those under 16 and over 60 can obtain an electronic entry visa to Egypt from the e-visa platform. Isa also pointed out that soon the government will announce a new multi-entry visa to Egypt, valid for 5 years, which will be issued for a fee of $700. According to statements by Isa, in mid-March, Egypt received 11.7 million tourists in 2022, up from 8 million in 2021, marking a 46.2% increase. Isa said the number of visitors to Egypt is expected to increase by 28% this year to 50 million. Egypt's tourism sector was dealt a hard blow by the COVID-19 pandemic, with revenue dropping from $13.03 billion in 2019 to $4.1 billion in 2020. However, the sector has begun since mid-2021 to flourish as Egypt secured $10.7 billion in tourism revenue in fiscal year 2021-2022, up from $4.9 billion in fiscal year 2020-2021. According to the Central Bank of Egypt in October. Egypt received 13.1 million tourists in 2019, 3.7 million in 2020, and 8 million in 2021. The country, which has 1,200 tourist hotels, hopes to double tourist numbers to 25 to 30 million by the year 2028.
Right, welcome back, and back to Dr. Ibrahim, and we're speaking about a very important sector, particularly at this very current stage. Let me take here your reading, or your how you view or how do you describe the status of the tourism sector in the meanwhile?
I think we are taking the right directions. Among the very few things, personally, I feel that we are taking the right direction is the tourism sector, for many reasons. Number one, you have to know that it's the third largest provider of our currency to Egypt. Number one is exports. They represent 36% of our GDP. Number two is worker remittances. They represent about 32%. And thirdly, before foreign direct investment, is tourism. They reflect 12%, and then followed by FDI, foreign direct investment, of another 11%, and the Suez Canal is 9%. So when you look at where should we try to focus to get Egypt out of this issue of the currency and the devaluation of the Egyptian pounds, I think one of it, which we have the unique advantage, honestly. Egypt has this amazing advantage in tourism that we honestly have to work more on it.
So we are aware that there were global disruptions that reflected on the whole globe, and definitely this very particular industry in the worldwide, and particularly in Egypt. But if we take it from...
it's a blessing for us.
Exactly.
It's a blessing.
Sometimes disruptions or missed opportunities would be opportunities for other. And here I want to take how you view that.
First of all, we have to know who were our inbound tourists coming from. Originally, for many years, and I had the privilege and honor of participating as member of the board director of Egypt Tourism Authority before the revolution and immediately also after the revolution. So originally, the target tourists were coming from Russia, Ukraine, Germany, and the UK. Now, when you look at what is happening now, some of these destinations, as inbound tourists coming from, are no longer attractive as they are now. So we are shifting our tourist, tourism attractions to, believe it or not, to Japan, South Korea, China,
Yes, indeed.
and India, believe it. So we are opening new markets in addition to the existing one. Now, when you look at the Russian-Ukraine war, it obviously means that European destinations as travel are no longer attractive as before. So Egypt now will play this kind of attractive role during the crisis that Europe is facing with the Russian-Ukrainian war. Though the number of tourists coming did actually decrease from Russia and Ukraine, but it was actually balanced out and even increased from the other destination that Egypt now is focusing in. So I think that when you look at the 2030 strategic plan of Egypt, and when you see that, as it was announced on your report, that we seek 30% increase per year. Number one, we are targeting within the next 3 years, as per the Minister of Tourism, Mr. Ahmed Isa mentioned, that we are targeting by the next 3 years 30 million tourists. Where do we stand today? We stand today at 22. We have 12 billion officially been announced in terms of tourists. And if the forecasting for 23 is 30% more, which I think will be maybe over exceeding even the target, because we expect 15 million, which already I think from the first quarter we are reaching a higher number than the previous quarter of last year. So that means that Egypt is an attractive destination. That's number one. Second, what are the type of tourism that we have in Egypt? Culture, historical, I mean. And culture, if when you look at research done, Egypt is the #1 destination culture-wise, globally. So that's a unique opportunity. Third of historical and cultural sites are in Egypt here. And I'm sure you heard about the last two discoveries that were mentioned. One in January, the two tombs that were in Saqqara, and then the path in one of the pyramids.
The
all
greatest
news,
pyramids.
all the news were mentioning about them.
Yes.
And as you mentioned at the beginning of your report, when Egypt is actually one of the dream list, among the destination of the dream list of any person living outside of Egypt and outside of the Middle East. So as an advantage, I think we have it, because you have culture, you have religious. Can you imagine that Egypt holds 3 religions? We call them the Abrahamic religions: Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. St. Catherine is actually a destination for 2 religions: the Christianity, the holy path of
the holy path, yes, the Holy
Jesus,
Family path, yes.
And also Moses, the mountain, the rock of Moses, where it is said that Moses actually received the 10 commandments on the holy mountain of St. Catherine and Moses rock. So and Islamic, we are the founder minority, as we say, city, not country even. So when you combine these, you have another destination, culture, and then you have the religious one, and then you go into sea, sand, and sun. We call it the triple S: sea, sand, and sun. In the summer, the North Coast and how attractive it is. In the winter, Upper Egypt and how attractive it is, even as a destination of the Red Sea. So you have a third one. Fourth is sports. We are actually we already hosted several international tournaments in Egypt, and next conference, exhibitions, and trade fairs. So next the medical,
Therapeutical.
So imagine one country that possesses
and
all of these. Now that's why conference, exhibitions, and trade fairs. So if one country have the infrastructure ready for all of these kind of factors here, then what else is missing?
Infrastructure, because
there is something else which is missing, and that's what I would like to talk about. That personally, I think we missed the point of that tourism is not a commodity. Although we say we have a product, tourist products. Truly, we have tourist products, but at the end, when you look at the success stories and the case studies of successful tourism outside of Egypt, it's all about service, because tourism is a service. And the quality of the service is actually the quality also of the service provider. So what we need to focus in addition to the strategy that Egypt has, which I would like to talk about it in a minute, but we have to focus more on that tourism is a service, and the service is quality is related to the service provider. Now, who are the service providers? They are not the hotels, they are not the restaurants, they are not the centers of attractions historically. It is the people of Egypt. It is those who serve the tourists at all levels.
Calibers. You mean
levels.
here calibers who are
Calibers,
in
training,
service.
behavior. People, non-Egyptians, when you ask them what do you like about Egypt, the first point that comes is hospitality. We are known of being hospitable because of...
Hospitable and warm.
Of course, but few actually can abuse this. Few Egyptians, and unfortunately, these few actually create this buzz on digital communications. And that's why we need to focus more on the message that should be for Egyptians. Please do not treat foreigners and tourists as different than when you treat your colleagues and your family in Egypt.
It's a culture. But before I go into the culture and the message that we need to send from here, let me take some points.
Sure.
If we speak about an industry, if we speak about a sector, then we have to weigh the surroundings. So I mean here, competitiveness. Who are our competitors? How do we compete with them? Are we ready? Did we make our indoor homework for the rise that we want to be or to reach here? And yes, indeed, as you said, it's the people, but also the services and the places where where we are going to receive those people. So let me read here. How do you view our competitive in the area? How do we, or how are we really competing with them?
It's unfair comparison. I'm sorry to say that. Why? Because you just mentioned at the beginning that we rank 5th in Middle East and North Africa, which means that there are other 4 countries that are ahead of us. And the reason being that they are nucleus in infrastructure, so they have the top technology and they have they are good hospitality because who else? The UAE, United Arab Emirates. The Arab Emirates, it's a mix of cultures. When you look there.
But but on the other side, it doesn't have
the money. They have the money to spend.
But they don't have 10% of what we have.
But that's my point. That's my point. That we have the natural resources in all of the different types of tourism, but we cannot compare ourselves against others for one simple reasons. They have the money to spend, and they have the right skills, to deliver this hospitality of tourism, and the right technology. I don't want to go into negativeness when I talk about tourism in Egypt, but if you look at, I just came from UAE, coming from Dubai, and I'm watching, how airports are and how smart gates are, and smart gates are not only for locals and residents of Dubai and the GCC, but smart gate is for all tourists coming, and everything is already automated, but it required a lot of spending on that. So if you look at the priorities of where should we spend our budget, definitely you have to focus on this. But personally, I cannot compare.
But if we speak about
countries.
that, we have to speak also about the difference in prices. And I mean here, yes, you're speaking about a very luxurious trip to the United Arab Emirates.
And Saudi Arabia.
Saudi, yes,
well.
definitely. And we're speaking about very luxurious trip because the prices are overrated, and you are aware, and I am aware, and we know about.
The problem in tourism in Egypt, and this is historical, by the way, is that almost more than 80% of Egypt tourism come from charter flights. And that's a problem, because when we look at charter flights, most of the money doesn't come to Egypt because they're paying for their package outside of Egypt. So most of the tourists they just come to get the benefits of the package here. And I think the strategy of the Egyptian government is they want to diversify away a little bit. You cannot go 100% away from charter flights tourism. But one way forward, which is not actually in the other destinations which are in front of us, the issue of charter tourism. And that's a major challenge, if I may say. This is a major challenge in Egypt, that if you want to get more hard currency, you want to get a premium type of tourist, you should not rely on this chartered flights.
Right, Dr. Hegazy, before we continue on with our discussion, and let me here take another report in Egypt's eases tourist visa requirements. So let's watch and we'll come back for more discussion.
In a special travel issue, Time magazine selected the Great Pyramids of Giza and the nearby historic sites in the Saqqara necropolis as one of the world's greatest places to visit in 2023. The travel issue featured the Pyramids of Giza on its cover among the world's most exciting and sought-after destinations for 2023. The magazine highlighted the start of the special operating trial period of the Grand Egyptian Museum, the GEM, which is set to be officially inaugurated later this year. According to the magazine, the 5.2 million square foot GEM, located on the outskirts of Cairo, with a view of the Pyramids of Giza a mile away, houses 100,000 artifacts, many of which were moved from the century-old Egyptian Museum in Tahrir Square. Some of the artifacts have never been seen by the public. Time also highlighted that the new Sphinx International Airport, which restarted operations recently after expansion work, is only 40 minutes away from the GEM. The magazine recommended visiting the Saqqara area and its active excavation sites. It also recommended visiting the Zoser Pyramid, the oldest complete stone building complex known in history, which was reopened to visitors in 2020 after renovations. In early March, the GEM started offering a limited number of guided tours in certain areas of the museum, including access to the gardens, commercial area, official gift shop, the hanging obelisk, the Artium, and the glass hole. In January, a report published by the Mail Online suggested that Britons leave the miserable winter weather in their homeland to enjoy a warm and sunny winter weather in Egypt for a long period of time and at the same cost of living at home. The report also mentioned the efforts carried out by the Egyptian government to promote the country as one of the best long-period winter season tourist destinations. It highlighted that Egypt houses a large number of hotels and resorts that meet different tastes, especially in Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada. These hotels also offer other amenities such as panoramic views of the Sinai mountain range, private beaches, outdoor pools, spas, and diving centers. Also, on January, the American website Desert News selected Egypt as one of 5 international places expected to be the most popular travel spots in 2023. The website cited Egypt's long-awaited opening of the Grand Egyptian Museum, the GEM, as the main reason for its choice. It went on to say that the museum overlooks the iconic Giza Plateau, which houses the Great Pyramid of Khufu, the last surviving wonder of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. In addition, the website also listed among Egypt's landmarks historic Cairo, home to a number of monumental edifices, and the coastal city of Alexandria. It also suggested that travelers enjoy a Nile cruise trip between Luxor and Aswan, and recommended a number of restaurants and eateries offering the best in Oriental and Egyptian cuisine.
Right, welcome back, and back to Dr. Hegazy. And if we want to discuss tourism, then we have to speak about the existing tourists who come to Egypt, and who do we seek to attract at this upcoming stage, plus these strategies that are being put in this domain.
Let me first talk about the strategies, because I think, as I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion today, or tonight, that Egypt has a good strategy that is of three platforms, or three pillars. Pillar number one is how should we attract more inbound visitors, which is the entry. And I think the report mentioned the issue of the multiple 5-year visa, which is similar to what Saudi Arabia is also offering now. In addition, adding more countries into the electronic visa upon arrival at the airport. So this is number one, and I think they also are expanding in terms of the number of renovating airports and opening new ones, like Sphinx Airport, International Airport, and other ones also. So that's one pillar of the strategy. The second pillar of the strategy is to increase the capacity of rooms, hotel lodging rooms, at different star levels. So I think the strategy is to increase from 212,000 rooms to 290 rooms, which is also, and not only rooms in major cities, but again in the diversity, because every part of the Egyptian land is actually part of tourism. You're talking about oases, you're talking about the Red Sea, you're talking about beaches on the north coast, beaches on the south, upper Egypt. So the issue of increasing room rates is also being targeted, and a lot of funding has been channeled there. The third part, which is my favorite part, which is for the first time, I think the government will be focusing on the tourist experience. We call it the customer journey. When he comes to Egypt, what type of challenges he expects, what are the bottlenecks, and which means that we are now starting to consider that tourism is a service, and the journey of customers in terms of his satisfaction and his claims and complaints and positiveness and the whole process of from the first touch points with Egypt in terms of booking to arrival to departure. All of this is what we call it the customer or the tourist journey. So Egypt also is focusing on that side by making sure that the tourist travel experience will be as positive as much as we hope it to be. So that's the three pillars of the strategy, and this is very important because you touched about the inbound, the number, you also touched about the receiving side, which is the number of hotel rooms, and then thirdly about the journey itself, which is again, this is what people expect from traveling here. But the problem is that we also want to upgrade the type of tourist that is coming to Egypt. And as I mentioned, you will not have luxurious tourists coming on charter flights. That's why we are moving away, or we hope that we're moving away from relying over 80% on charter flights to individual travelers. Individual travelers will be attracted by online communication. Most of the booking now, if you want to go, you have the right now, and you have the option and opportunity that you can book everything online. If you don't do that, you may take the advice of the tour operators. And so if we focus on this shift, then definitely we'll upgrade the type of tourists coming. And that's why I think also Egypt is going into where money come from. Money come from Asia, the Far East. Money come tourists, Japanese tourists. The money come from Chinese tourists. Money come from Korean tourists. And I had the opportunity of taking a Nile cruise during the winter, and I was very glad and happy to see that the cruise was 100% occupied. And not just in Luxor and Aswan, but the whole area of Upper Egypt during the winter, it was a blessed winter for tourism. Why? Because we started to think the right directions of how we upgrade international tourists coming to Egypt. I think this is a wonderful opportunity for Egypt today in terms of how can we face the issue of hard currency, and where should we boost our influx of hard currency to Egypt. Foreign direct investment is okay, is important, but when you look at statistics and historical trends, tourism come before foreign direct investment. Why? Because we have the competitive advantage and competitive edge over all our neighboring countries, honestly. Even if we rank less than other countries, but we still have the unique advantages across the board in Egypt tourism.
Our time is running out, but I need from you, just in 2 or 3 minutes, to tell me, how do we propagate Egypt at this upcoming stage in the right place so we can reach what we really acquire for?
I think promotional campaign is very important. I think incentives that we have to give for tourists, individual tourists, as well as for travel operators or tour operators. I think we have to rely more on the marketing influencers online, because we need to upgrade, number one, our tourist profile who's coming here. And that tourist profile is now embedded on digital communication. They are attracted not by celebrities anymore, they're attracted by tourist marketing influencers. I think we have to rely more on attracting more of the organizations that are in charge of tourism, you know, especially inbound tourism. And I think also we have to look at local Egyptians, because one way also to curb the demand on hard currency is to reduce the number of outbound tourism. And the only way you decrease the number of outbound tourism is to attract those who are traveling abroad to travel inside Egypt instead of traveling abroad. And so rather than focusing only on inbound tourism, we have also to balance by focusing on local tourism for Egyptians as well. I think this should be the direction for the next couple of years.
Indeed, indeed. Unfortunately, my time is out, even if I wanted to speak more and speak about measures that we need to take at this upcoming stage, or just in 1 minute, what do we need at this very upcoming stage to do in order to at least start another phase for tourism? Just in 1 minute.
In 1 minute?
If it's possible.
In 1 minute, I think we have to open up our mindset. That's all. You know, I can sum it up in one thing: just open up our mindset as Egyptian government for attracting tourism as investment, as tourist investment, and as tourist as travelers. So the mindset has to change. That's all I can say.
Okay. I guess that takes us to the end of this episode. Dr. Ibrahim Hegazy, Professor of Marketing, we thank you so much for being with us and for your input tonight.
Thank you, Mona. It's always a pleasure to be with you.
Always our pleasure.
Happy Ramadan again.
Thank you.
For you and for the Egyptians, actually.
Thank you so much. And for all the Muslims around the globe. So I guess that takes us to the end of this episode. And next debate would be on Sunday. So have a happy weekend, and many thanks for watching.